All the numbers we're going to get, so we'll get started. A massive welcome to everyone. A huge thank you for coming to this session. It really is a privilege that so many people have chosen to attend this one. Given the four fabulous sessions that are on, I hope that I've introduced myself to everyone in the room over the course of the day. But if I haven't, my name's Stephen Ayrers. I'm today's co-organiser, along with a fabulous Jude Hunter of Ashton School, and it's been an absolute privilege to see people get together in the service of working out what works, which after all is the idea of research. Now, for anybody who's had the dubious privilege of seeing me teach before, you know that I'm rather sceptical about ideas such as discovery learning and group work. However, the irony of that is that today's session will be the most group learning session you could possibly imagine, because what I want to do is just talk very briefly about my own experience of conducting a little bit of action research in a particular subject into formative assessment and progression, and then give you the chance to consider how that would work in your own subject area. So I would hope that everybody in here is a subject specialist of some kind or another, unless you just walked onto Ash Lawn as a chance to escape the EU referendum, which goes well. Can we just do a quick survey? Have we got any maths specialists in here? Show your hands. Okay, a bit of quiet reflection for this. Have we got any English specialists in here? All right, okay. History? Geography? Science? MFL? Anything I've not covered? Yeah. Beautiful. Music, beautiful. Right, so what I'm going to do then for the next 40 minutes is I'll just very briefly outline my own experience of some action research into history. You'll then gather into your own subject groups to discuss how that might work. I'll start with two images, as I always like to. The first one is taken from the Education Data Lab and is their best kind of capture of the wildly different rates of progress that our learners make. Now, I know Alice Peacock talked a lot about this, about how when we label and fix an ability label of students, we can often damage their learning. And this is a guide of the students who eventually achieve a C at GCSE in the various different parts of the data. And you can see that our expectations of linear progress are actually wildly inaccurate, and if we apply them, will lead to us labelling most students as underperforming at some point in their career. The second one is basketball, because once at the school I work at, I overheard a heartbreaking conversation between two students in which one said, "I'm bare gutted, it's because you don't have special living culture," and I'm really upset. So they were bare gutted. Why? Because they've got a 3B in basketball. Now, I think when the book comes to be written on where national curriculum levels went wrong, it must be called 3B in basketball, because I don't know what that means. I don't think it means anything, and I think it's really upsetting to students. Now walking around thinking I'm a 3B in basketball. So when I started this project, I was driven by the aim to get us away from that and towards something a bit more appropriate. So the first aim today is to share my findings from research that I undertook last year into good practice in formative assessment of history. And that got me very much down the rabbit hole of progression, which is something which, once you get onto the topic of progression of the subjects, I don't think you can ever go back. And so we're going to consider the relationship between formative assessment and progression of the subject. And then finally, and most importantly, you and your group are going to take what we've discussed, take it to your own subject area and begin to consider, well, what might be the kind of fundamental ideas within our subject? How can we make progress in English? What does it actually mean to get better at maths? You might feel really settled in this already, or you might feel like you don't have a clue. Either way, I found, when we did the session at the National Research Conference last year, that it's a really productive dialogue between different teachers from different schools who have different ideas about what it actually means to get better at the subject. So, very quickly then, to tell you a little bit about my work from last year. I had the pleasure of working with ASCOR, the Association of School and College Leaders, led by the fabulous Leora, who's unfortunately not here today. I think she's probably so devastated by the result that she's looking to emigrate back to her native South Africa. There we go. I was hired to design guidance for school subject reading to good practice in formative assessment history. That was it. Very simple remit sort of thing. But very quickly I came to realise that you can't really do that. To put out a document that says this is what good formative assessment looks like in history, without reflecting first on, well, what is it we are assessing, would be equivalent to putting out these kind of dreadful guides of progress hands or mini plenaries and things which went around devoid of any context in schools in the last 10 years, and then people thought formative assessment is just a thing you can take out of the box. So this may seem obvious, and it now seems obvious to me, which I'm not sure is a reflection of my own development over the past year and just general consensus in education on the importance of subject-specific knowledge. And here is a fabulous lady I was just talking about, Leora. Glad to join us. Good formative assessment must be subject-specific because it can only come from a sophisticated, deep understanding of how we make progress in the subject. I felt strongly as a trainee teacher a couple of years ago that formative assessment was seen as this thing that we had to do, and this thing we had to dip in and out of, and every student had to draw around their hand and write 5 things that they learned. I'm not sure I ever actually reflected on the importance of considering what it was that we were assessing first. And so any project to review your formative assessment must first start with an understanding of what it is that we are assessing in the subject. And in order to do that, I would argue that there are 2 questions any department needs to consider. And I think these are probably the 2 central questions on teaching and learning. Others might like to dispute that, and we're always happy to have a debate here, but for me, these are the 2 questions that keep me going, and they are: what does it mean to make progress in your subject? And how can progress in your subject be assessed most effectively? I think that's it. I think obviously there's other issues around behaviour and classroom management and blah, 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 blah. But I think as a teacher of history, my way of getting better at my job is to continually reflect on these questions. What does it mean to make progress in history? And how can progress in history be assessed most effectively? What we're going to do, because obviously this is a giant project, is spend the majority of our time together just considering the first question for your subject. So once again, what does it mean to make progress in chemistry? What are the key ideas? Is it to do with learning more about the structure of cells? Is it to do with a particular skill? In maths, is it to do with becoming, more skilled in independent inquiry, or is there a particular content that you need to learn? Now, I'm leaning much more towards the importance of content knowledge at the moment because of what I've read about the importance of knowledge in learning, and the centrality of knowledge to higher order thinking and so on. But others of you might believe that the disciplines are more skill-based. So to look really briefly at history as an example, I'm not going to flog the poor dead horse of national curriculum levels. My primary colleague John Bunsky will be talking later about his idea that actually they weren't that bad. If you ask me, they really were that bad and worse. I think maybe there was some potential to them originally, but once we had kids saying they were 3B in basketball, it was time to just back up and start again. They conflated attainment and progress. They were not originally used as they were meant to be. They ended up being used for every single task, leading people to believe you could level a history essay with 5B as opposed to a 5C. And it didn't mean anything. They didn't mean anything to students about how to improve. They didn't mean anything to parents about how to improve. So for me, I think there is a need to consider replacement models. And of course, we had the chance to do so 2 years ago with the removal of those. Without going into intense detail about what we found, we suggested that a replacement model in history could be built around the following things. An overarching assessment framework which is planned out in advance to take account of a mixture of tasks. So students can be assessed through their written responses, because obviously history, the essay is key. Short knowledge-based tests and regular formative feedback. I don't believe that levels should have any place in it. I think they're not just methodological problems with national curriculum levels, but with levels as a system and as a thing. And I think Alex Ford, who unfortunately is on at the very same time, has done a fabulous job in history of designing an example of the levels 3 progression framework. The final thing is I think any framework must require progress and attainment to be kept separate, and this is probably the biggest problem about national curriculum levels. If you are a maths teacher and your student has done a test on algebra in term 1 and shape in term 2, I'm sorry, that's probably a gross misunderstanding of what you actually do in maths, but we'll go with it, and they've achieved 5B on both, then surely they've made significant progress. Under our current system, they have not, because you need to master more knowledge at a higher level each time, and it doesn't to me make any sense. Students are not necessarily able to grasp that unless we make it very clear to them that how you're doing overall and how you've done on a particular task are very much separate. So that was a kind of basic summary of what it means to make progress in history. But now I would really like to throw the floor open to you. I'm sure that everybody in here will have reflected at some point on what it means to make progress in my subjects. What I mean by that, to clarify that question a bit more specifically, is what are the fundamental concepts or ideas which underpin my subject? In history, the sense of the debate is whether it is about the development of your substantive knowledge, which means the stuff of history, concepts like democracy, events like the Peasants' Revolt, the year in which World War II started, etc., etc. So there's a debate between substantive knowledge and the importance of second-order knowledge, which I would categorise as the skills that we use when studying history, the skills that we use to make sense of it. So can you get better at explaining the causes of events? Can you explain better how change and continuity have interacted over time? There is no consensus on which is a superior way to conceptualise understanding in history. It's an ongoing debate. And so the historians, for example, I would imagine, would like to kick off by considering, well, is it better to conceptualise understanding as substantive development or second order? Now, for the other subjects, I have very little idea how that looks. I know that Christopher Bolton of King Solomon Academy has done an excellent series of blog posts on the knowledge of each subject. in place along a similar kind of disciplinary substantive framework, but I would not even feel qualified to offer such comment. What I would like to do is for you to split off into your areas. Now, I am sceptical of group work, but I think when you have highly motivated adults who've given up their Saturdays to do so, then we can do so. So if you'd like to organise yourselves, perhaps if we have the two biggest groups, taking up a corner, and then your other subject specialists, to organise yourselves into groups, you'll then have until about 5 minutes from the end to just reflect on this question, and hopefully for every group to come up with some kind of basic ideas. We're not going to nail it in this time, of course, but I hope it will kick-start a dialogue which you can then take away and we can bring back in for some feedback at the end. If you are on your own, then you are more than entitled to just reflect quietly on your own, or you might like to join another subject area. Any quick questions or ideas or suggestions before we kick off? Yes?
Well, who's the guy you mentioned in the King Solomon School?
Name's Chris Bolton. It's spelled with K-R-I-S, and then I think it's B-O-U-L-T-O-N. So you might like to use that as a guide. Right, any other questions? If not, let's get started.
I think we think that it lies somewhere between that sort of classic skills and knowledge dichotomy.
Don't say dichotomy. No, dichotomy, like when people say false dichotomy, I just think I've heard that enough. Yeah.
The skills aspect of English being something like rhetoric, the idea that the logic of what you're producing and how to structure a text and structure your writing in a way that makes sense to you, in line with now there's this big focus on context and the history of literature and the importance of what's typical for certain periods, and so they need to talk about what they've got in their head in a way that actually makes sense to them and doesn't just meet some format that we've given to them.
Yeah, so we had this discussion with the maths people, the maths duo over there. I mean, I strongly suggest, not that I necessarily have a problem with Nikki Morgan, but I don't think she has the power to shift the fundamental ideas of each subject. So the question is, do you think the changes are going in a positive direction for better English learning, or taking it away? I mean, that's, the changes that happened in the last couple of years to the curriculum and the targets.
I think if we move away from this PEA that we've been talking about, if we encourage students to break through that rather than stick to it, I think it must be positive.
You started talking about assessment, and I think that is the key, isn't it? We've had some great discussion here and really good ideas about the fundamentals of what makes English good. But the nag in all those conversations was, but then they have to do this as an exam, but then the assessment is like this.
And measuring it as well.
Yeah, of course, and I think if we have more time, you're absolutely right, the majority of today's discussion will be focused around this, because Lord knows, you could spend years working on this, let alone this question, but I think you're absolutely right there. I'll go to science next, because I walked over to butt in, and the amount of time I had to wait suggested that there was a really, really frank and honest discussion going on over there. So, science team, what did you think? What does it mean to get better in science?
We split science into things that you know, and then also the fact that they need to apply, analyse, and do practicals to do with science. So to break down the things that you know, what are the things that you know? How do you get better at science? We just took one topic in biology, and it's about cells. So we broke it down into easy, medium, hard. And the easy one would be drawing an animal on the plant cell, labelling it, and the medium one would be sort of looking at what the organelles do within the cell and why they're important. And then the harder bit of the science may be looking at specialised cells, relating it to stem cell research, and looking at the importance of sort of specialised cells.
Okay, so that's really interesting. There's a kind of graded progression. Now, I'm as a historian, and I'm not going to put words in the mouth of the history team, because I'll have to come to you, and I'm afraid we will be out of time after that. But we would probably disagree that in history you can grade progression like that so easily, which is fascinating, because it just shows a different kind of character of the subject. Now, we started with history, will all be history in the end. What do we say in terms of reflecting on some of the ideas that were presented at the start of the session? Or the discussion that you had later on?
Well, we stated that you definitely needed the historical knowledge. Without that, you couldn't make movement. But we used the word synthesis, that it needs to be an interlock between the actual historical knowledge itself and what you do with that knowledge from a critical analysis point of view, from an evaluation. you know, using sources, but we are pigeonholed by, at GCSE, by certain types of questions that, you know, limit the extent that the kids can be critical.
Of course, I think, sorry, I didn't mean to
Go
interrupt you. I think that's a really nice note to end on, because obviously the whole, you know, the great thing about research ed for me is it's like a day in this utopian future where the world is as it's meant to be, but on Monday we have to take it back to the real world. So the whole point of the project that I did in the session is that whatever's happened, I'm really sorry if we didn't get time to get to your subject area, whatever's happened, it's up to you. You know, a department and a teacher must have their own process of reflection, both because it's one of the most powerful things you can do as a teacher of the subject, and because it's necessary to develop professionally. And it's the way in which I think we can best reclaim our autonomy in the classroom. And hopefully, the only objective of this session really was to leave everyone more confused than they were going out of the room than they were when they came in. Because I know I always walk away with a million thoughts about my subject buzzing around in my mind. And I think the only way we can reclaim our autonomy as teachers from the diktats of national curriculums and etc. is to consider these two questions. And so if you walk out of this room feeling more confused than you were when you walked in, then I've done my job. And unfortunately, I'd love to go on, we're out of time. But a massive, massive thank you to everyone who attended. I hope you enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.